Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. In June, I read 20 books, so today we're just going to go through them. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about them, if I recommend them or not, and what I rated all of these books. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. The first book I read in June is Sea Change by Gina Chung. This is a new release and a debut by this author. This is just like a general fiction book about a woman in her 30s who kind of feels like she has no sense of direction in life. Her father went missing when she was really young, and her parents have always had a very strained relationship. And now, as an adult, she's like becoming more and more distant from one of her best childhood friends, and she's drinking more and more. And we're basically just following her on this journey, and she works at an aquarium and kind of forms an interesting relationship with an octopus there. It almost seemed like a coming of age story, but with a woman in her 30s. I don't know, to me, I felt like the story was pretty mediocre. There wasn't a lot that it left you thinking about. There were some interesting parts within it, and overall I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought the writing was absolutely beautiful, but like I said, the story wasn't anything particularly special. Next is Walking Practice by Dolki Min. This is a horror book by a Korean author about an alien who has crash landed on Earth and must conform to the human ways of life. So it's really just this alien trying to fit in and survive as a human on Earth, and there was some interesting commentary about gender and sex and just really what it means to be a human at the end of the day. I thought it was very, very interesting. There were also some really cool illustrations throughout the book. I mean, just the cover art itself is like enough to make you want to read it. It was very strange, very gruesome at times. Like I said, it is a horror book, but I would definitely recommend this book. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Snuff by Chuck Palahniuk, which is a book about a woman who wants to set a record by having sex with 600 men on camera. So this story is told through 4 point of views. So we have 3 of the men that are waiting to be in this film, and then also we get the point of view of the woman who was like the casting director who got all these men together to be in this. At some points, I honestly had a hard time keeping track of like whose point of view I was reading from, because they all seem to be like written or narrated very similarly. So I had to keep like referencing the chapter title to see whose point of view I was in. It was just kind of a book that doesn't really have a point, or doesn't really seem to have some. There were some interesting like developments with the characters, or I don't know if you could really call it reveals, but just learning new things about these characters that was a little bit interesting. But overall, it wasn't my favorite. I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read The Need by Helen Phillips. This is like a sci-fi thriller about a woman who is home alone with her 2 young children, and she hears somebody in the house. So this book very much focuses on like the struggles of motherhood and how far a mother is willing to go to protect her children. So it was very interesting, and I see a lot of people compare this to Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I think that is a totally accurate comparison. So if you like Dark Matter, I think you'll really like this one. I flew through this book. I read it so quickly, and I think for the right person, this could definitely be like a one sitting type of book, because the way the story progresses and the suspense that's happening is all very quick, and like I said, very fast paced. You want to just keep like turning pages and reading this story because it's very interesting and very suspenseful. I also really enjoyed the ending, even though it's like kind of a speculative book, so we don't get a very like clear-cut resolution or a lot of like, it's not a neatly wrapped up ending. It's kind of a little bit open, but I really enjoyed the way that it worked. And I also am not really a big fan about reading about kids, but in this book, the little girl, I don't know, she was cute, she was funny, she really had like a personality that I felt like was very accurate to her age in the story. Sometimes I feel like children in books are written to be way more mature than they normally or realistically would be at that age, but I think Helen Phillips did a really good job of writing the children in this book to be like actual children, and they weren't absolutely, I don't know the correct word, they weren't absolutely annoying to read about. The little girl had me giggling at some points. So this book was a 5-star read for me. Then I read Contagion by Erin Bowman. This is a YA horror sci-fi with space zombies. So we're basically following this like ragtag crew that is sent out into space to investigate a distress signal coming from this planet where there is like a secret lab, like research facility. So when they get there, everybody's dead, everything's like in disarray, and they have to kind of piece together what happened to these people and try to figure it out before they too succumb to the same fate. I had a hard time connecting with the characters in this book, so I really found myself not truly caring what happened to them. I also like really did not like the captain of this crew. She irritated me and just made me angry at so many different points throughout the story. Some of the decisions she was making, it was just kind of frustrating and aggravating to read. I really did not like her. It is YA though, so I'm not technically the target audience for this. It was fun. It had some interesting elements to it. I would still recommend it at the end of the day, especially if you are of that age group and you like horror and you like sci-fi and it sounds interesting to you. Then I would say definitely go and give it a try. For me, I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This one I picked up because I really wanted something that was high on like summer vibes, and this book definitely delivered. This is a second chance romance book with a dual timeline, so we get flashbacks from when these characters were younger, and the girl was at the lake house for the summer and she would always meet up with the neighbor boy, and they kind of developed a very strong friendship, a little bit of a romance, and then something happened. I think when they were 18 they had sort of a falling out and they hadn't talked to each other since then, but now I think it's 12 years later or something that they said, and she has to go back to this small town for a certain reason, and she reconnects with this guy and they kind of rekindle their past relationship. I know a lot of people have an issue with the big conflict in this book, and I can totally understand why. However, I just really love this book mainly for the feeling that it gave me while I was reading it. It's like how you would want any book to make you feel, where you're just like happy and giddy and you just want to keep reading it. And I really loved all the characters. The drama was a little bit silly at some times, but I can admit that, and I can admit that I still enjoyed it despite that, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. Then I did my extreme horror or disturbing books vlog, so the next 5 are going to be about that. So if you want to watch my in-depth thoughts as I read any of these, you can watch that vlog. But the first one I read was No One Rides for Free by Judith Sonnet. This is about a woman driving her 2 children to college. When they stop to get gas, a strange man gets in the car, and basically his only goal is to physically and mentally torment them. And he certainly does that. This book was very full of action, very gruesome and disturbing, just as it was meant to be. I had some issues, like just trying to understand the mother's reaction to certain things that happened. It just seemed like, I mean, I guess you can't really say how you would act in this situation unless you were put in that situation, so I don't want to criticize people who react to things differently, but some of the things, it just seemed like she kind of gave up too quickly. Like this man was trying to get her children to do like certain things, and she was just like, rather than trying to protect her kids and like fight back, she was just like, oh, just do it, just make him happy. And I'm like, I can understand that to a certain extent, because you'd rather have them do that than die, but I don't know. It just seemed like she didn't really try hard enough at certain times. Anyways, I didn't give this book a rating, but I didn't hate it, so I think I am gonna give Judith Sonnet another try in the future and read some of her other extreme horror books. Yeah, Then for that vlog, I read 100% Match by Patrick C. Harrison. This is another just gross and disturbing one about this man who is single and he wants to not be single and he wants to find his 100% true match, and he just does some really gross and messed up things. The main issue I had with this one is that the way that it was written felt very disconnected. There is a spider up there. Alrighty. I don't know if I should try to take that outside. I don't know what kind of spider that is. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna try to ignore that for now. Anyways, my biggest issue with this one was that the writing style felt very disconnected. Like, it was kind of like, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and it was just hard to really get into the story for me. So I gave this one 3 stars. It definitely could have been worse, but I think it definitely could have been better as well. I'm still watching this spider. I don't know what kind of spider that is, because if it's like a black widow or something, I should probably do something, right? Okay, hang on. Guys, look at it. What kind of spider is that? Okay, I'm back. I took the spider outside because I don't know what kind of spider that was, but I know Colorado's got some like pretty venomous ones. So I'd rather have it outside than in my bedroom. So anyways, back to what we were doing. The next one I read was Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates. This is about basically a psychopathic murderer and sexual predator, and the story is very heavily inspired by Jeffrey Dahmer. There's a lot of gore, a lot of racism, a lot of horrifying descriptions of violence, but I did not enjoy the writing style, and I found myself getting bored throughout this book, which is weird because of how disturbing the content was. I gave it 2.5 stars. I felt like it was really hard to get through, so that's that. Then I read Cows by Matthew Stokoe. I gave up on this one shortly after halfway through because it just felt like it was just too gross and too just absolutely disgusting and repulsive, and it just didn't seem worth it to me. Like, I wasn't invested enough in the storyline of this one to want to read through all of that gross stuff. So I did look up like spoilers for the second half, and I don't think I missed anything particularly good that would make me ever want to finish this book. So yeah, this was, I guess, a DNF for me. Like I said, if you want to see my more in-depth thoughts, I gave a little bit of spoilers in my reading vlog, so you guys can go check that out if you feel like it. And then the last book that I read for that vlog was Brother by Anya Alborn. This is basically about a family of cannibalistic serial killers living in a rural town in, I think, like West Virginia, I'm pretty sure. We mainly follow Michael in this story, and he is one of the sons in this family who has a longing for something more than that. He doesn't want to be a part of this family. He doesn't want to do what they make him do, and he just kind of wants to escape this small town and find something better for himself. I think this is a great example of a truly like disturbing and horrifying book, but it's actually got great writing and a very good plot, in my opinion. I think it was very interesting, and it's definitely talks about like the way that the situations we are raised in can really affect us. Obviously this is kind of a more extreme example, but you get the idea. I thought this one was really well done. Loved the ending. I gave Brother 5 stars. Then I read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I was very excited to read this one because I've heard so many good things about this. So many people loving this book. This is a domestic thriller about a married couple who is going away to stay in this isolated, historic chapel, and it is very obvious that this trip is what is going to either make or break their marriage officially. It was definitely like intriguing and unique, and I thought the story was interesting. However, by the end of the book I just had more questions that never really got answered, and I felt like a lot of it was just kind of messy. So I gave this book 3 stars, and I was a little disappointed because I guess I was just hoping for more because it has been so hyped up and so highly praised. Then I read Petrified Women by Jeremy Ray. This is a novella about a woman in a relationship with a man who likes to play pranks on her. And this man is also an artist who specializes in doing like wooden carvings of women and like women's bodies basically. I don't want to give away too much of the plot. I think this one is a good one to go into with as little information as possible. Just let the story take you for a ride. However, do be aware of trigger warnings because there is a lot of talk about sexual violence and violence against women. It was definitely a unique story and had some fantastic, creepy imagery. It is on Kindle Unlimited, and I would definitely recommend it if you like horror. Like I said, it's a novella, so it's a quick read, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. This was my first book by Abby Jimenez, and I was very excited to read it because I've heard so many good things about her in the romance community, but I don't typically read romance, so I'm a little bit more picky with romance. So this book follows a woman who finds this dog and she tries to contact the owner, but she doesn't know that the owner is actually a famous musician and he is on tour, so he doesn't get her messages until way later, and they end up connecting over the phone, texting, calling, and kind of flirting with each other, and then meeting in person so that he can get the dog back. I had a lot of issues with the actual plot of this one. I feel like so many things happened that were really dumb or just really cheesy. You can look at my Goodreads review for some spoilers and what I specifically didn't like about this book. I gave it, I think, 2.5 stars. However, I will try Abby Jimenez again in the future. Maybe this one just didn't work for me, but I think her writing style was good. You know, the first half of the book I was kind of invested in, and then we got into the really dumb stuff and it kind of lost me. But that being said, I will try from this author again. Then I read Leech by this author. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that, forgive me. Anyways, you'll have to bear with me while I try to explain the plot of this. Basically, we are following this doctor who is sent to this chateau to replace their old doctor after he dies. However, the doctors come from this place called the Institute, where they're basically controlled by parasites that kind of all have a hive mind. So it's very interesting. It was very high with like gothic atmosphere, and it was just a very unique world and some very interesting characters, like some characters with tails and twins whose hair seems to get tangled together and they have like supernatural powers. Like, there was definitely a very interesting array of characters and a very unique world. However, I feel like a lot of things just went over my head. I found myself confused by a lot of it, but I will say that's my own fault. It has nothing to do with the book. Like, this author is clearly very talented, and I can recognize that this is a good book, even though I personally didn't understand some of it. It is definitely unique. It's not like anything that I've ever read before, and I would recommend it if you think this is something that you would be interested in. I did not rate this one because, like I said, though my reading experience wasn't that great, I know that that's my fault, and it's not the book's fault. This is a good book. I just couldn't make it work for myself. Then I read A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This is a collection of essays. It is a nonfiction about a woman who has a white mother and an indigenous father. She herself is white passing, so she really talks a lot about racism and mental health, oppression, and trauma, and it was very, very well done. There were a lot of heavy topics, and it was hard to read at some points, just reading about like the injustice that people of color face. And there were some things that she talked about that I had heard of before, and some things that I had never heard of that really shocked me. I would highly recommend this one. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. Definitely check it out. Then I read The Haar by David Sodergren, and I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. It was fantastic. So this story follows Muriel, who is an elderly woman and one of the last remaining residents of this small Scottish fishing village. Now we have a billionaire who is trying to develop this land and make a golf course, and so he's trying to pay off the residents there to get them to leave so that he can develop this land. But when a handful of residents refuse and try to fight back, he takes matters into his own hands and gets rid of them in unconventional ways. So while all of this is happening, Muriel finds help and she finds a friend in a very unconventional place. That's all I will say. This book was like the perfect type of weird horror that I really enjoy. I 100% recommend this to anybody who is a fan of horror, especially weird horror. There's a creature feature, there is some gruesome body horror, real life injustice is happening, and Muriel is just a fun character to follow. Just, I don't know. I love old people, and I love when old people are feisty like that. Obviously, if you couldn't tell, I give this book 5 stars, and I think it might be my top read for this month. It was just so good, and I can't wait to read more from this author. Then I read Drowning by T.J. Newman. This is a very fast-paced action thriller about a flight that takes off, and shortly after takeoff, crash lands into the Pacific Ocean, and with a small group of survivors still inside, it begins to sink into the water. So now we're following this group of people that are stuck in this plane underwater. Their oxygen is running out, and the people on the surface are desperately scrambling to find a way to save these people. I think this was very interesting and very well done. This is T.J. Newman's second novel, and I think she is very talented writer. There were some parts that were a little cliche and a little cheesy, but overall this is a very suspenseful book that you could definitely read in one sitting. Like, I flew through this one so quickly because literally from page 1 of this book the plane is crashing. Like, the author wastes no time building up this story. Like, you are in the action right from the beginning. So if you like very action-packed, suspenseful survival thrillers, then I would recommend this one, but I know it's not the type of story for everybody. I gave this one 4 stars overall. Then I read Waif by Samantha Kolesnik. This one I think is a good book to go into blind because a lot of weird things happen and you can't really, I think, at any point predict where the story is gonna go. Just know that it is gross and messed up horror. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This was my second book by this author, and with both books that I've read by her, I felt like, first of all, she's a very talented author. There are so many good quotes and just underlying commentary on, I don't know, I guess like feminist undertones about what it is to be a woman and to live in a society that is primarily run by men. And like I said, I think she's a fantastic author. However, these are novellas, and I feel like I hate when I feel this way about a novella, because I'm like, yeah, the point is to be short, but this one, it's like almost feels like it's too short, where at the end there were still some things that I was wondering about or questioning and wished that I got a little bit more information on. So because of that, I gave it 3.5 stars. But like I said, Samantha Kolesnik is a fantastic author, and this is definitely gross and just messed up horror. And the last book I read in June was The Senator's Wife by Liv Constantine. This is basically about a woman who is married to a senator, obviously. She is dealing with lupus, and because of some complications with that, she has to get a hip replacement. So she decides to, I was gonna say order. You don't order people, you hire people. She decides to hire a home health aide to help her with this recovery and do some administrative stuff like around the house and just kind of help her out while she recovers from her surgery. I felt like a lot of this book moved very slowly. I didn't think that the mystery was very compelling. Like, I don't know, I just didn't really feel a sense of urgency to continue reading this book. I don't know. It wasn't a book for me. I'm sure there are people out there that will enjoy this type of thriller, but for me, I gave it 3 stars. Alrighty, and that is all 20 books that I read in June. I felt like I was reading so slow. I was almost not fully in a reading slump, but I was like halfway in a mini reading slump throughout the month. So I feel like I thought that I was reading so slow and such a little bit, but to get to the end of the month and realize that I still read 20 books is kind of crazy to me. So yeah. Anyways, if you've read any of these, let me know, share your thoughts down below, and thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time.